What up, guys? I am Lou. In today's video, guys, we're going to be talking about deploying a script, a Python script to AWS Lambda with dependencies, right? So we're deploying a script with dependencies, and the script that we're going to be deploying is going to be actually one of the projects that I have worked on before on another video, which is the SharePoint files to AWS S3. So we're kind of using that script, but I am using a slight I made some updates to it. I haven't made a video related to that, but I have made some updates, and some of the updates relate to I had some issues deploying SharePoint. Like that video, I was using the SharePoint package. Again, SharePoint is a package to connect to SharePoint and to be able to download files. In this case, that's what I'm doing, downloading files. It was the LXML package that was causing issues because there's some C compile files in that package. So either way, to avoid using anything, like try to keep everything pure Python, that's when I switched to the Office 365 REST Python client, blah blah blah. It's a long name, but you know that package, right? It's a different package. It's awesome. I like it a lot, man. I've been using it more and more, doing more testing with it. I'm a big fan of it. I really am. So I'm actually glad I switched to that. Been playing around with it. So, but I'm not going to go too detailed into the weeds of all of the changes that I'm making. I'm going to highlight a few of the changes. I'm not going to go too detailed because the main focus here is I want to kind of show you on deploying some script that you may have, right? In this case, a Python script to AWS Lambda, but also has dependencies, because it's different compared to just have a script that has no dependencies. Then it becomes a lot easier. But because we're dealing with dependency files, you have to pretty much zip your dependencies, your packages. You gotta store that into an S3 bucket. I mean, there's more setup, more things that you have to do. So that's the whole goal here. But I am gonna go a little bit detail of the code that I have, and we're not gonna write it from scratch, because again, this is the code that I'm gonna use is actually code that I had from a previous video. So take a look at that video if you want to kind of see exactly more details on how that's done. But I am going to touch on a few points on why we're doing some changes and things of that nature. And guys, so before we get started, hit that like, give me a follow, guys. Again, like always, give me a follow, hit that like, appreciate it. And let's get started. All right, cool. So right now it's empty, of course, but we're going to really just create one file for now. And the one file that we're going to create, we're going to call it lambda function.py. So here's the thing. I'm trying to keep it simple for the purpose of what we're going to discuss. By default, when you first start create a lambda function in AWS, it's looking for a lambda function.py file. And it's also looking for a lambda, handler function in order to execute and run whatever code you have. But doesn't have to be that name. You could change it. You could have a file with maybe app.py, and then a function could be something else, whatever else you want to call it. But just for the purpose of kind of going more through being able to deploy, trying to keep it simple, we're going to give it the name that it's ultimately set by default in AWS Lambda. So it's going to be lambda functions, what we're going to call. So I am going to copy some code that I already have, but I'm going to explain some of the things, right? Again, this code that I'm copying, it's actually code that can be found in my one of my other videos. But again, there's a few things that I did make changes to, and I'm gonna go over that with you. And then also there's some things that probably need to be cleaned up here a little bit too, now that I'm looking at it. So let me just go ahead and clean it up real quick, but it should be fine. So one of the main changes is in the video in my previous video, I had this SharePoint class in its separate file. Now, for this purpose, I'm actually going to put it all in one file. Just kind of keeps it a little bit simpler based on what we're trying to do. So for that purpose, just keeping it in one file. So that's why you'll see this SharePoint class inside this file. All of these other functions are good. They could stay. It's not an issue. So one of the big changes, or one of the changes, better yet, is going to be, so this is the Lambda handler that I needed to add it. Because again, in AWS, it's looking for a function to execute. It needs something to execute. So again, I could call this whatever I want, but by default, this is what it's looking for. It's called Lambda handler function. If you call it something else, then you could change it. And I'll show you in a minute on where do you change it and how you change it. And then ultimately, in my other videos, we had a .env file. So our environment variables were in a file, and we were reading that file, and then of course extracting the variables and assigning them to these variable names, these objects, right? Well, since what we're going to end up doing though, we're going to be getting system variables. Now to get that, we're using the OS, the EventBridge. So in this case, we're using the OS method, and we're going to be calling our variables a different way than we would have before. See, before we would have done something like this to be able to go ahead and extract the variables from a file. But since we're not extracting variables from a file, we're getting them from the system. I had, one of the changes is this. This is the way it would be. This is the way you would extract system variables. Maybe I could hover over it and it may say something. I guess not. That's fine. But as you could tell, I kind of already did that here. We have, again, file folder name. And again, this folder name is the SharePoint folder name. And honestly, I should probably give it a better name. So let's call it SharePoint folder name. Right? And then we have username and password. And that's fine. Username, password. Oops, you know what? No, that's fine. So I'm gonna have to change this. So let's go ahead and make the few changes. This will be one area, and where the other area. That it? Yep, I think that's it. All right, cool. But again, just kind of going through the code real quick. These are all variables that are going to be coming from the system, and we're going to set that in AWS. So we're going to go through that in a minute. These are all of our objects, right, that we're assigning, which again, I'm assigning an access key for AWS, a secret key, a bucket name, and then also a bucket subfolder. Because if you're dealing with subfolders that you want files to get uploaded to, we're specifying that as well. And then of course we have our SharePoint folder name. This is the folder in SharePoint that we want to download files from. And then ultimately we need credentials to connect to Office 365, which is username, password, SharePoint URL, SharePoint site, then of course docs. So we'll go through that. Okay, now that we have everything in here, let's see. I don't need requests. All right. The only thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and install 2 packages. But before I even do that, because I have not even haven't even created have not even created a virtual environment. Let's go ahead and get that created. So let's go ahead and do Python -m vnv env. And once it gets created, I'll go ahead and I'll activate it. I'm going to say yes. I do want to add this to my project. Boom. All the squiggly lines should go away. Or maybe not. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and activate it. Source, env, scripts. Again, Mac and Linux, it will be bin, Windows scripts, and then activate. Then I'm going to do a pip install Boto 3. This is to be able to connect to the AWS S3 and to be able to upload my files. The next one will be install. This is a long name. Let me get it real quick. This is called Office 365 REST Python client. That's one of the longest package names I have seen, to be honest with you. So let's go ahead and get that installed. And again, a lot of these packages have additional dependencies, so that's why you see all these other packages being installed. So now that that's installed and that's good to go, my lines went away, so that's good. So now we're good, man. But just kind of go over real quick. This Lambda handler is what's going to get run on Lambda side, and which means it's going to run this function here, which is the get files function. So of course in here it kind of called the SharePoint class down below, the downloads files function. It provides the folder, it gets a list of files. Then from there it started getting every file one by one. As it gets every file one by one, there is a upload files to S3 function in here, which is this guy. So of course from here, then also there's this bucket subfolder built. You kind of have to build the subfolder within the file name. So that's kind of why I created this function. Also, I need to change this. So let me bring in, one of the things I need to bring in here, I just realized, would be from passlib import purepass. So, and that would be, nope, you know what, never mind, I don't need it. I thought I did. I do not, never mind, I do not need it. So let me go ahead and remove this. All right, cool. And again, as just kind of you're seeing, this calls a function. This function calls another function, which ultimately calls two functions. One to build the subfolder, and then for the inside the bucket, and then another one to upload it to S3. And then that's kind of where this is connecting to the AWS client, pretty much. Passing in my access keys, secret keys, and then I'm doing my uploading file object, and then that's where I'm uploading everything, and that's it, right? So now that we have everything here, let's go ahead and what else do I need? What am I missing? Let's go ahead. Let me go into the folder. Let's go ahead. And so one of the things that we got to do, since we're dealing with dependency for the scripts, we have dependency packages for the scripts. We're going to have to pack that up into a zip file. So I'm going to kind of walk through the steps on how do we do that, right? How do we pack this up to a zip file, like the packages itself. So let me go ahead and go to my terminal. I'm already here. I have everything activated. So the first thing that I'm going to have to do here, let me just make sure. So I'm in the main folder. What I'm going to need to do is I'm going to run pip install target, right? I'm going to target a specific folder. In this case, I'm going to call it package. I'm gonna call read. You know what? I forgot. I don't even have a read file. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm gonna do pip freeze requirements.txt. So now we have this requirement.txt file. If we take a look at it, it just has all of the packages that we're gonna need, right? We're gonna need to pack all of this together. Because once we need to package this, because when we push it out to Lambda, if it's a third-party package, we need to be able to access those packages to, again, for the code to run, and that's kind of the whole purpose of packing these dependencies. So now let's go ahead and let me run it. Do pip install target. Now I'm going to target a specific folder on where I want my dependency file to go into. Then I'm gonna do read requirements file. Yep, read requirements. So let me go ahead and run it. So it's pretty much taking all of the packages, all of my dependencies, and it's gonna packet it to a folder that is called package, which is this guy right here, right? So now I'm gonna go ahead and step in to that package folder. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm going to need to zip this folder. But one thing that I want to show you is, so you could go to this website. So Linux and Macs has that already built in, which means in the terminal, you would type in zip. You could actually zip files and unzip through the terminal already. It's already like part of the operating system. But for Windows, it is not. You have to either install like WinZip or something. And then, of course, with that application, it will zip files or unzip files. But we want to run this in the terminal. So on top of that, you would have to probably use like WinZip, their executable, file that they have to be able to zip and unzip and things of that nature. Well, there's another way to do it. I'll put the URL into the video. In the body of like the message of the video, where you can go and download it. But you can go ahead and download this. It's a executable file. You don't install it on your machine, you just use it, you just run it. And I have there it goes right here, zip.exe. So if you were to click on it, for example, it will want to save executable file. But again, you don't, the way you run it, you would like call it in your terminal, and I will show you how we do that. So that's what you want to do. And in my case, I have it saved under my project files folder. So what I would end up doing here is I would put double quotes C / program files / zip.exe double quotes. So now it's going to end up running, right? If I run it, you can see it's asking for these any one of these arguments. So if you're not for sure what something is, just go ahead and run it, and it'll tell you. The two that we're going to end up using, the argument's going to be R for recursion. We're going to be reading everything in the folder to zip. And the other one's going to be G. Where's G at? So G stands for glow. And ultimately what it is, it's to be able to take a file and we're going to add it to the zip file. Right, so that's kind of pretty much what that does, what we're going to be doing there. Okay, so now what we're going to end up doing is, now let me go back. We're going to do R for recursion. I'm going to do 2 dots. The reason why I'm doing 2 dots because I want to go back a level. I want to save this going back to my root folder where my project is at. And I'm going to call this deployment package.zip, right? That's going to be the folder that it's going to create, my zip folder. And then I'm going to put dot. Dot means I want it to read all the files. Because remember, I'm inside my package folder. My package folder contains many files. So the dot is saying, based on the directory where I'm at, go ahead and read all the files and go ahead and zip all of those and create this folder, this file pretty much, which it's technically a folder. Zip it up. So let's go ahead and run it. That's what it's doing. It's reading all the files in the folder and it's going to zip it up to one file, which is called deployment package. So depending on what you have, how many packages you have, and of course how fast your system is, it could take a few seconds or maybe a little bit more. All right, so now that I'm done, I'm going to go back, cd ... And now you can see this is my package, which is just all of my packages. But I also have my deployment package.zip, right? Because that's the package that we're going to end up uploading to AWS. The next thing, though, there's one more thing that we need to do. We need to now move our Lambda function.py file to the zip file, deployment package file. So let's go ahead and do that as well. So what I'm gonna do here is same thing. I need to call my zip.exe. It's gonna be -g. Then I'm gonna specify deployment.zip, and then I'm gonna specify my file, the file that I want to move to this zip file. And there it goes. They moved it. So now that it has moved it, that's it. We're pretty much done, right? We got everything packed, everything ready to go. So now let's go ahead and go to AWS. So I'm in AWS now. Let me go to S3. So, well, the reason why we're doing it this way, and I'm gonna explain in a minute why. But ultimately, we're taking our source code and our dependencies, right, which is a zip file. That deployment package has our source code and all of our packages that are associated with that source code. It's all in the zip file. So we're gonna take that and we need to put into some kind of S3 bucket, right? So I think I have one already, which is maybe this guy, Lambda source code 123, so on. So let me go ahead. I'm gonna delete this. Alright, so now let me go ahead and upload. And again, I'm uploading what we just created, which is this deployed package zip file. And let me go ahead and upload. See how the size is 16.5 megabytes? So I'm going to explain, why that's important. Now that we have that uploaded into our bucket, now let's go to Lambda. So we're going to create a new function, right? I'm going to create it from scratch in my case, and I'm going to call this SharePoint to S3, right? That's what I'm going to call it. Under runtime, let me make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to select Python 3.9. This is fine. The architecture, that's fine. Nope, that's fine. I'm going to leave that as is. Let's create function. Shouldn't take too long to create. Or maybe not. Maybe it would take a little bit. I don't remember. There it goes. I'm going to say I don't remember taking that long. Okay, so by default, once you create a Lambda function, you'll notice two things, right? There's a file in here called lambda function.py. Then there's also a function here called lambda handler. Now remember, by default, this is what it's looking for. I kept my code, to kind of mimic the same file name and to, have a function with the same name, which would execute something. You don't have to do that, right? And if you don't do that, which again, most people won't anyways, there's ways to change that. And I'll show you in a minute on how to change that. Now again, if we're dealing with no dependency file, then we could either just replace this with our code that we want to do and we're good to go for the most half. But because we're dealing with dependencies and things of that nature, one of the things that in order to upload our zip file, we're going to go to upload from, and we're going to select AWS S3 location. But I want you to see something. We go to zip.file. See how it says right here, for larger than 10 megabytes, consider using AWS S3. Now this used to be bigger in size. I believe it was like 70 megabytes or something before. My guess is that they probably want people to start using S3 to deploying their source code. And again, 10 megabytes, not a lot, right? So if you're dealing with bigger projects, maybe with more dependencies, things of that nature, easily it's going to be many megabytes. So that's kind of my guess on why. Even like mine, it's not that big. I'm only using a few packages, but even with all of that, it's over 16 megabytes. So I'm already 6 megabytes over the limit. Either way, let me go ahead and click on Amazon S3. All we need to specify here is the actual the file, like the location of the bucket and the file path. So what I'm going to do now, let me go back to S3, and I'm going to go ahead and locate my bucket, and then I'm going to click on the file, and I'm going to copy the URL, and then now I could paste that over here. Hit save. All right, cool. So once we do that, and again, it tells you too large to enable inline coding, so we can't see nothing, which is fine. I mean, we know what we deployed. So see under runtime settings, this is where you would change that. So if you click edit, and then just click on info, right, and it tells you right here, you can tell Lambda runtime which handler method to invoke by setting the handler parameter on your function. And then it kind of gives you the example here, right? Like if you have a main.py file, it would be main.handler. That's what this would be, right? If we had a file that was called project.py, this would be project, then it would be dot, then it would be the function that it's actually going to be executing. This is where you will make those changes. But again, I kept mine the same name, so I don't need to make these changes in my case. What else do we need to do? Another thing is, let's go to configuration. And this is going to be important as well too. If we go to a general configuration, see where it says timeout 3 seconds? Now by default it's very minimal. And again, it's set that way probably because it's designed for something that's real quick that may only run in a short period of time. My process though, because I'm downloading files, I could have, I don't know, maybe I download 100 SharePoint files. Well, every file may take a few seconds to download and then to save to an S3 bucket. Let's say it takes 2 seconds each file. Okay, that's 6 seconds or whatever how many files I have, right? Let's say I have 4 files. Well, 2 seconds, see, that's 8 seconds. I mean, that already it's more than timeout. So make sure to adjust this, because if you don't, it's going to error out. You know, in my case, I'm going to put 3 minutes, you know. But if you're dealing with a larger load, and then you know you're dealing with a larger load, change this to whatever you feel fits for your needs, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. You could also adjust your memory and all of that in here. Storage. I'm dealing with small amount. So honestly, for me, I'll probably try to deal with something minimum. I don't need a lot, and I'm fine. Let's see. All right, that's fine. I'm hit save. The only other thing that we need to do now is going to be this environment variables. So let me click on it. We don't have nothing set. So remember how we talked about system variables. If I go back to my project, see all of these variables here, these are now going to be system variables, right? And ultimately I need to configure all of these inside AWS Lambda so it knows again which SharePoint file to pull from and all of that stuff. So let's go ahead and let's get that set. Let me kind of show you how that's set. We're gonna hit edit, then we're just gonna add variable, right? That's pretty much what we're gonna do here. So what I'm gonna add is let me just go ahead and add all the keys like first, right? I'm not gonna put the value in it, but I just want to add all the keys. And some of them I will enter in, you know, in this video, while others I'm gonna enter in without showing my screen, just because of, you know, I'm not trying to show my secret key or my password or things of that nature, right? But nevertheless, this is where you will put everything. And what makes this very ideal is instead of having it embedded in your source code, you could always come back later, right? Let's say if you're dealing with an API key that may be changed, like a secret key, well, now you could just come back and change it here and you're good to go. Has nothing to do with your source code. Let's say you want to move, you want to have things go to another bucket now, a different bucket, just change it here, right? Or you want to have it go to a different subfolder, again, just change it here, right? Same thing. So some of the ones that I'm going to go ahead and add is going to be like bucket name. So again, if I go back, let me go to my buckets. So I have a bucket called, I spelled it wrong, but that's fine. SharePoint, should be poing. ETL testing 2. Then I have another subfolder called staging. So if I go back, this is the bucket name. Then of course the subfolder is going to be called staging. That's what I will put here. So let's say you had another subfolder inside there. You would do /, then it would be the other folder name, right? Just kind of FYI. But in my case, I don't have another one. So just kind of just keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and put in our SharePoint like site information, right? That I don't really care much if you see or not. It's fine. The SharePoint site that I'm using strictly for testing. It's not a true production, right? I don't have any sensitive information or none of that stuff in there. So even if somebody hacks it or something, again, it's all just dummy test data for the purpose of YouTube. That's all it is. So under SharePoint folder name, right? SharePoint folder name. Let me see if I have SharePoint open. I do. So I have SharePoint, and again, if you see, you have data 2022, then I have all of these files, then I have sales. But I have all these files here. All of these files are the ones that we're going to want to download from SharePoint and upload to S3. So that's kind of where I put data. Again, don't put documents, but put only, so if you click on documents, whatever file you have, folder you have in here, right? In my case, it's data, then in 2022. So that's what you're going to put on here as well. The SharePoint document library, it's going to be like this for everybody, right? And the reason why, again, if I go back to SharePoint, see up here on the top where even though I click on documents and click on data, but it is shared documents. And then ultimately it's whatever folder, data, and so on and so on. So this is kind of more like a standard. It's not going to be different for you than me. This is going to be the same for all of us, pretty much. So username, password, then of course my keys. So now let me go ahead and put that in. So let me not share my screen and let me go ahead and put all of that in. Let's see, my password. Then of course I got my username. And then I'm gonna go ahead and save. Cool. Alright, so now that I have all of that saved, my environment variables, I configure my timeout again from 3 seconds to 3 minutes, because I know in my case it's gonna take longer than 3 seconds. And I think that's it, guys, man. I think that's all it. I mean, that's pretty much it. Now what we're gonna do is to test it out. Let's go ahead and click on tests. Let's do a real quick test, right? So go to test and let's go ahead and click test. And hopefully it runs successful in the first try. Cross fingers, let's see. So far it's running, so that's a good thing, I guess. Let me go to the bucket. Let me go to staging. Oh, we got files, guys. We got files. That's good. And it did work. Awesome. So as you could tell, it ran, and there's our duration time, milliseconds. Max memory use, so that's good to know. So, you know, did not use a lot of memory, but that's good. It ran. As you could tell, we took that code. It was able to connect to SharePoint, because again, that's what I have here, my files. It was able to take all of these files and move them over to an S3 bucket, right? So now let's say that's good. That's like the main piece, right? We got it working. If I go back to my code section, my function overall section, we have now that code doing something, right? Which in this case would take files and upload it to S3 bucket. But we're not done yet. Let's say we need this process to run daily, right? Let's just say we need it to run every day. Maybe it runs every day at midnight, for example, something of that sort. And the reason why you need it to run, like a good scenario would be, you want all the files dropped to an S3 bucket, because you're gonna have maybe something like AWS Glue run, you know, an hour later, and it's going to end up pulling all those files in, you know, in the ETL process, and let's say load it to a data warehouse, right? Something of that. So that would be an example of, you know, why we're even moving it from SharePoint to S3 for the purpose of having the ETL process extract the data and then load it to like a Redshift or data, you know, some kind of data warehouse or database. So in order to do that, we're going to now, there's, you know, we're going to add a trigger. So we have an add trigger function here, or you're going to go to configure and go to triggers. And same thing, add trigger. But I'm just the easy way just to come here and click on add triggers. Now there's trigger that could be based on different events, right? You know, there's many different events here that could initiate the trigger. So, but in our case, we're going to utilize EventBridge, right? So I'm going to click on EventBridge. So we don't have existing rows, so I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this row, I don't know, they just call it a midnight execution, because it runs at midnight, right? Event will run every day at midnight, and this is going to be a schedule expression. So there's the schedule expression what we're going to use because we want something to be scheduled to run, and there's a pattern, right? Here's an example that tells you could do rate 1 a day. So rate 1 a day works, but if you do rate 1 a day, it's going to be based on when you create this row. So if I create it now, that means it's going to run every day at 11:57. That's what it is my time central. Then tomorrow will be 11:57. The next 11. Well, I don't want that. I want to be more like a precise midnight, right? I just say that for example. So that's where I'm going to use something like this, the crones. But let's look at the expressions real quick, because just, you know, kind of it's easier to see what's out there as options, right? So this kind of tells you the first field is minutes, hours, days, months, so on and so on. But let's look at some example. Here's a good example, right? So if you look at this one, runs at 10 a.m. UTC time. So keep that in mind. If you run it, if you want it to run midnight, like Central Time, you gotta make sure that you're specifying it, you're setting it in UTC time, and this is every day. So the way this would look would be something like this, right? This pattern, right, would be cron. Then the first value is 0, which is minutes. Second value will be hours. In this case, it's 12. Again, military time. Star for all the days of the month, all the months. Question mark would be for all days of the week. If you want to do Monday through Friday, then you could do it Monday through Friday like this. But if not, put question mark for all the days. Then of course stars for all the years. So we're going to actually copy this. The only thing that difference is we're going to change the 12 to UTC time, like midnight. So now let me go back. And let's say if I wanted to run 12 midnight Central Time. So for me, that's that means UTC time is plus 5 hours. So this will actually be 5, and that's it. It will run at 5 a.m. Central Time, which I mean UTC time, which is really midnight Central Time. But let's say I want to test this out, right? When it's about to be 11, so let me make this 2300, and I'm gonna make this 1. So that means in about 2 minutes, if I save this, this job should run on its own, right? And I would just want to make sure and confirm that it does run. So let me go ahead and click add. And boom, now we have that trigger set. Let me go back to my S3 bucket, and I want to delete all of these. Delete. Cool, so all of that's delete. So the time, it just turned 11. I set the time to run at 11:01. What did I? Damn. Now let me go back and check to make sure that I did specify 1101. Let's see. I did not, damn it. I put 2300. Let me edit this. So this would actually be 4 Central Time. Hit next. Next, no tags. Update rule. Boom. All right. So it's still 11, right? Still 11 o'clock. So if I come here, if I run, nope, nothing. So what should happen when it runs at 11:01 Central Time? Because again, I set it for 4 a.m. UTC time, which again, it's 11 Central my time. There it goes, 11:01 now. So it should be running. Now let's kind of, to confirm, I could hit refresh. Let's see if we get any files that drop into our bucket. So far, no files. Damn, maybe it's not running. Yeah, I should have seen some files by now. Alright, let me go back and see, make sure there's no errors. So there is a way you can monitor your activity of what's running. So let me do it in the last custom, the last minute. So nothing the last minute, maybe that's the last 3 minutes. And let me go back to my trigger and look at the details. See, I put 4 a.m. UTC time, which will make it 11 my time, and then of course 1 minute. So this should have ran. Let me make sure. There may be a small delay. There it goes. That's what it was. So even, I mean, it wasn't instant. I guess because it needs to spin up the server, then it'll ultimately execute it and all. So okay, it worked. It did. It worked like a charm, right? You could tell, look at the time. This actually came in about a minute later. So by the time it spins up the server and does everything, it took about a minute before files start dropping. But it worked, guys. I mean, so now going forward, this is going to be running every day at 11 p.m. You know, it's going to start triggering. And that's kind of the whole thing, right? You know, now it's kind of scheduled to run. It's connecting to SharePoint and dropping files to S3 bucket. Then from there, you can do whatever it is you're trying to do, right? You can have your ETL process, extract data from it, or whatever. So at least that kind of gets the data from point A to point B, and it's scheduled as well, you know. So, guys, hopefully this helped out. This video right here was a request from a follower, and so again, guys, if y'all have any requests, if there's any anything that you want solved, whatever that you may have, let me know. You know, you go ahead and email me, leave in the chat something, and again, I'll add it to my list. I want to be making many more videos, man. I've been dropping a lot of videos the last couple of weeks, and that's gonna just kind of ramp up even more, man. I'm gonna be dropping even more videos. Again, hopefully this helps out. Like always, guys, give me a like, give me a follow. Appreciate the support, and peace.